This conference will now be recorded.
Hello everyone, a very warm welcome to all of you. I'm Dr. Rashmi Patil, the Director and the Chief Mentor for the RAISE Academy. So we are all here today to discuss regarding the assisted vaginal birth GTD 26, so which was released in the recent 2020. The new guideline was being released and there are certain changes in this. So we'll be discussing this guideline, how to go about this, how to read the guideline. So majority of you, I believe that you are all exam going and you must have read this. So if any new people out there who have joined and who wants to know that how to go ahead with the guidelines, so I'll be discussing the key points of the guideline as well as the highlighted ones, so you should concentrate on them. The inner write-up, that is the percentages, those are very important. The tables will be very important, so I'll be discussing them one by one today. Yes, the secret of your success is determined by your daily agenda. So make sure you're planning your day very well so that you won't be wasting much time, and you should know how to read the guidelines smartly. So how to concentrate on the key points and which are the recalls and the important points which have been asked or stressed frequently upon. So you should be knowing all these points. And then a quick revision in the end, that is very much necessary. So I'll be telling you regarding the plans for how to revise the most important guidelines and the nice guidelines, the green top guidelines and the top articles also in the end. Yes, to discuss about the guideline, this has been asked in the previous the recalls, that is in the UK, between 10 to 15%. So this, of all the women, they give birth by the assisted vaginal birth. In the strategy, it is mentioned as 10 to 13%. If you go by the recent guideline, it's just 10 to 15%. So if asked in the exam, please to remember that in UK, it is 10 to 15% of all women, they give birth by the assisted vaginal birth. Now, the next is you have to encourage the women to have a continuous support during the labor, as this can reduce the need for the assisted vaginal birth. This is a very important key point, that this has been proven that if the woman has a continuous support during the labor, this is going to reduce the need for assisted vaginal birth, particularly when the carer is not a member of the staff. It could be any of her birthing partner. So this point you should remember, that constant support is important for her. Inform the women that the epidural analgesia may increase the need for assisted vaginal birth, although this is less likely with the newer techniques. So you should remember that it may increase, but it is less likely with the newer techniques. Now, inform the women that administering the epidural analgesia in the latent phase. So remember, this is the latent phase compared to the active, does not increase the risk of assisted vaginal birth. Okay, so if you're administering the epidural analgesia in the latent compared to the active, so this is not going to increase the risk of assisted vaginal birth. So you should remember this point. The next point is encourage women not using the epidural analgesia to adopt the upright or the lateral position in the second stage of labor. Every word is important. The women who are not using epidural analgesia, if you tell them to adopt an upright or a lateral position when in the second stage of labor, this is going to reduce the need for assisted vaginal birth. So these are especially important when they're asking you a single best answer and choose all are correct except. So each and every word matters here. So always remember this point. Encourage the women using the epidural analgesia to adopt a lying down or lateral position rather than the upright. So if they are using epidural, you have to advise them a lying down lateral position than the upright position in the second stage, as this increases the rate of spontaneous vaginal birth in them. Okay, so if the woman is not using, then she can take the upright. But if the woman is using epidural analgesia, then you have to make her lie down in the lateral position. This is going to increase the rate of spontaneous vaginal birth. A very important point. Now, recommend, remember, this is recommend delayed pushing for 1 to 2 hours in the nulliparous women with the epidural analgesia. This may reduce the need for rotation of mid-cavity, the instrumentation. So you should recommend the nulliparous women to delay the pushing for 1 to 2 hours if they are on epidural analgesia. Each word is important, so you have to concentrate on them, okay? Do not routinely discontinue the epidural analgesia during the pushing, as this increases the woman's pain with no evidence of reduction in the incidence, okay? So when the woman is pushing and she is having an epidural analgesia, do not routinely discontinue that. The NICE guideline, it is going to say that concluded that the oxytocin should not be routinely started in the second stage and should be used with caution in the multiparous. Okay, so you are not supposed to start the oxytocin in the second stage and should be used with caution in the multiparous women. This is what the NICE guideline says. And there is insufficient evidence to recommend the following things. Which are they? Any particular regional analgesia technique in terms of reducing the incidence of assisted vaginal birth. So it is not going to, there is insufficient evidence that any particular regional analgesia technique in terms of reducing the incidence. No, it won't help. Routine oxytocin augmentation with epidural analgesia as a strategy to reduce the incidence. No, this will also not work. Now, routine prophylactic manual rotation of the fetal malposition in the second stage, this is also not recommended. Yes, so this is a very important point. So I want all of you to listen to this carefully, because this is the most of the times how and which kind of an instrument you're going to use. You're going to use the vacuum or the forceps, or depending upon the stations, either it is outlet, it's a low cavity or a mid cavity. This point is very, it should be very much clear for you all. So you can see that this is the spinous process, and this at the level of spine, it is considered as the zero station. Anything above is in the minus, anything below it comes as a plus. So we all know this. Now, it's very easy to remember that when you're not able to feel the fetal head from the abdomen, it means you are not feeling anything. It is zero that you're feeling from the abdomen. It means the fetal head, this is at the zero station. Okay, am I clear with this? So in case if you're not able to feel anything from the abdomen, it is zero palpable from the abdomen, it means it is at the zero station at the spine. This is very simple to remember. Now, as and when it is descending downwards, you're going to tell it as the +1, +2, +3, +4, and at the perineum as +5. Now, we always know when you get +1, it means this is the highest rank that you're getting, correct? So 0 and 1, these are the high forceps. The next two numbers will be your mid cavity. The low cavity. The next one will be your 0 and 1 is your mid one. The next +2 and +3 will be your low cavity, and the +4 and the +5 will be your outlet. So we are not recommending anything above 0, which is a high forceps. We are not using that. We only use the mid, low, and the outlet. So the highest order is given for the 0 and the +1, that is the mid cavity. Then come downwards, it is the lower grades, so it is +2 and +3. And then come downwards, it is where the scalp is visible, or it is at reaching the outlet, it is your +4 and +5. Okay, so the higher orders are not used. Then you're using the mid cavity, the low cavity, and the outlet, the 4 and 5. Yes. So when you're seeing the fetal scalp without separating the labia, the fetal skull has reached the perineum. The rotation is not extending beyond 45 degrees. You don't have to rotate more than 45 degrees. It is within that range. It means that the station is at +4/+5 and you are going to apply an outlet forceps in such situation. Now, when the fetal skull is at +2 centimeters, but not on the perineum yet. So there are two types in that. One requires rotation, the other does not require rotation. So it is just short of the rotation, or you have to rotate and then deliver. So in this situation, here it is not exceeding 45 degrees. Here it is either non-rotational or the rotational, less than 45, more than 45. But the fetal skull is at +2, +3. Here you're going to apply the low forceps. This is really important. The next one, the fetal head is no more than 1/5 palpable. So it is not more than that. The leading point is at 0 or it is at the +1. Again, the same subdivisions like non-rotational and the rotational. So these are called the mid-cavity forceps. Now these two, the low and the outlet, this can be performed in your labor ward. But the mid-cavity, it is on the higher level, so this has to be performed in the theatre. The choice of the instruments, yes, Strat-OG clearly says that the conditions where the ventouse has to be preferred over the forceps. When are you going to do this? There's an urgent low lift-out delivery with no previous analgesia. Vacuum, you do not require that much analgesia. So it's an urgent and just the low lift-out delivery. Always prefer the ventouse. Whenever you're short of rotations, you can prefer the ventouse. When the operator or the maternal preference, they have the choice as the ventouse. When either of them is suitable, but the operator or the maternal preference is for the ventouse. So this is what your Strat-OG says. Now, the conditions where the forceps would be preferred over the ventouse. Yes. Again, the Strat-OG says where the maternal efforts are poor, because ventouse requires maternal efforts. When there are poor efforts, you cannot use the ventouse. You are going to prefer the forceps. When the operator or the maternal preference again is the forceps. When the large amount of caput is there and you're afraid that your ventouse will not fit on the caput properly or the fetal head, in that condition, you're going to prefer the forceps. Now, Strat-OG had mentioned it as 34 weeks. The new guideline says it is 32 weeks now. So less than that, you are not supposed to use the ventouse. The marked active bleeding from a fetal blood sampling site, in that condition, you cannot apply. The aftercoming head of the breech, you cannot apply. And when there is a face presentation. Now, when should assisted vaginal birth be recommended? Or it could be contraindicated. There is no indication which is absolute, and that the clinical judgment is required in all situations. So always remember, this is the new guideline which says that no indication is absolute and the clinical judgment is required in all these situations. Whenever there is suspected fetal bleeding disorders or there is a predisposition to the fractures, these are relative contraindications. Am I clear with this? So these are relative contraindications. There is no indication which is absolute. Clinical judgment is required in all situations. You should remember this point. Now, what happens when there is a blood-borne infections in the mother? It is not an absolute contraindication. What about the vacuum extraction? This is not contraindicated following a fetal blood sampling procedure, but if it is profusely bleeding, yes, or application of the fetal scalp electrode also, this is not a contraindication as such. Operators should be aware that there is a higher risk of subgaleal hemorrhage and the scalp trauma with the vacuum extraction compared to the forceps at preterm gestational ages. So we all know this. The vacuum birth should be avoided below 32 and should be used with caution between 32 and 36 weeks of gestation. So remember these gestation ages. Vacuum should be avoided below 32. It should be used with caution between 32 and 36. These words are really important. You have to memorize them. This is one of the favorite question of the RCOG people. And they say that, okay, the The patient has been pushing actively, passively, 1 hour, 2 hours, with regional, without regional, all the nulliparous, the multiparous, everything. So how are you going to read this important table? Here, there are indications. So the fetal indications, whenever there is a compromise, the CTG is showing pathology, or there is an abnormal fetal sampling, or there is a thick meconium, you are going to go ahead with the assisted vaginal birth. Now, coming to the maternal indications. Yes, it is nulliparous or it is a parous woman. It is with regional analgesia or without regional analgesia. Now, because she is nulliparous, she will require an hour extra compared to the parous woman. So what you're going to do? Nulliparous is 3. The total of active and passive stage both included. Okay, this is 3 hours total of both active and passive stage with regional analgesia. So whenever you're giving something extra, you have to add an hour extra, correct? So for the first paras, this is the nullipara patient, you are going to give 3 hours of total active and passive. Because she is having regional analgesia, she has something extra. So you're going to give an extra hour for her. Or 2 hours without regional analgesia. So this should be the rule. The nulliparous is 3 and 2. So 3 because 1 hour extra because the patient is on regional analgesia. And these 3 hours are the total of the active and passive. I hope I'm clear with this. Now the parous woman, because again, it is 2 hours. Parous woman has 1 hour less compared to the nulliparous woman. So it is 2 hours of total active and passive with regional analgesia and 1 hour without regional analgesia. So it is very simple. Nulliparous, remember 3 because it has an extra regional analgesia. 2 is without regional analgesia. For the parous, you have to subtract 1 hour. It is 2 with regional analgesia and 1 without regional analgesia. There should be absolutely no confusion between these 2 points. The next indications are the maternal exhaustion or the distress, the medical indications to avoid the Valsalva maneuvers, especially in the cardiac conditions, the combined like fetal maternal indications if they are there, the coexisting ones. These are the indications for assisted vaginal birth. These highlighted points are really important and you should remember them. Is it matter active, anything total it should be. So if it is active or passive, anything, it's only total, dear. You have to consider it as total. Okay. A low forceps may be acceptable for the assisted vaginal birth with a suspected fetal bleeding disorder, but vacuum extraction should be avoided. Okay, this is what they're saying, a low forceps. Now, the safe assisted vaginal birth, it will require a careful assessment of that clinical situation. You have to communicate clearly with the woman and the healthcare personnel who is there and the expertise in the chosen procedure. So this becomes really important when you come to the part 3. Because you're going to communicate everything to the patient that you're going to do. You have to involve her in the care plan. This is really important for your part 3. Now, what about the ultrasound assessment? This of the fetal head position prior to the assisted vaginal birth is more reliable than clinical examination. See, they are telling about the fetal head position only, but there is insufficient evidence to recommend the routine use of the abdominal perineal ultrasound for assessment of the station, flexion, and descent of the fetal head in the second stage. So you got the difference between these 2 points. Ultrasound assessment is of the fetal head position prior to the assisted birth is more reliable. But there is insufficient evidence to recommend its use. When are you going to use for the station, flexion, or descent? Yes, there is insufficient evidence. But however, this will describe about the position. This is another important, the safety criteria that everybody should remember. So as I said, head is less than 1/5 palpable. So it is almost like 0. So it is the station has come down to 0. So that becomes your mid cavity. Now, cervix should be fully dilated and the membrane should be ruptured. We all know this, otherwise you cannot apply the instrument. Station at. At is your 0 of the ischial spine or below. Below becomes your plus points, that is plus 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. The position of the fetal head is determined already. The caput molding is no more than moderate or plus 2. Now the moderate or the plus 2 molding is where the parietal bones are overlapped, but they are easily reduced. The severe molding or the plus 3 is where the parietal bones are overlapped, but they are irreducible, indicating that the patient has cephalopelvic disproportion. So you should remember this. So here it is no more than the moderate or the plus 2. So we are ruling out the plus 3 CPTs here. The pelvis deemed is adequate. The preparation of the mother, that is clear explanation given and informed consent taken and documented in the woman's note. This is in informed consent. What do you mean by this? You are taking a verbal consent in the labor room. Anything going to the theater, you're taking a written consent, but it should be informed. It should be documented in the woman's notes. Trust established and full cooperation is sought. And they agreed with the woman that she should be agreeing for this kind of an instrumentation. Appropriate analgesia is in place, especially when there is a mid-pelvic or the rotational birth. This is going to cause severe pain. So regional block can be used. A pudendal block can be acceptable. A perineal block can be sufficient for the lower or the outlet birth. So you have to make sure that she is having some good pain relief. The maternal bladder has been emptied. The indwelling catheter has been removed or the balloon is deflated. Okay, it should not be in situ. You have to remove it out, or at least the balloon should be deflated. Use all the aseptic techniques. Now, what about the staff members? The operator who is having the good knowledge and the experience and the skills in that particular instrument, only then he is going to pick up that instrument. The adequate facilities are available. For example, there's equipment, there's a bed, there's a lighting, there is an access to the operation theater in case if this fails. You should have a backup plan, especially for the mid-pelvic birth. The theater facilities should be available. You should inform them that we are going to do this procedure. And in case if it is unsuccessful, we may have to take the patient for second stage cesarean. So inform the operation theater. To allow a cesarean birth to be performed without a delay, a senior obstetrician should be present. If an inexperienced obstetrician is conducting the birth, he should be at least in and around. Now, anticipating complications that may arise, like for example, remember this point, there could be shoulder dystocia, there could be perineal trauma, there could be postpartum hemorrhage. So you are anticipating these complications in the instrumental delivery. Now, the personnel present were trained in the neonatal resuscitation also. So to make sure the pediatrician or a health personnel is trained in resuscitating the baby. Yes, coming to what type of consent. The woman should be informed about the assisted vaginal birth in the antenatal period, especially during their first pregnancy. They should be informed that the need could arise, especially you're telling them in the first pregnancy during the antenatal period itself. Now, if they indicate specific restrictions or the preferences, then this should be explored, that why they are doing this, why they are not happy with this. It should be explored by an experienced obstetrician, and that too, especially in the advanced stage of labor, it should be explored the reason that if there are some specific restrictions. For the birth room procedures, the verbal consent should be obtained. Remember, this is a verbal consent for the birth room procedures, and this should be obtained prior to assisted vaginal birth, and the discussion, everything should be documented. You're taking a verbal consent, but you're documenting everything in the notes. This is in the birth room. The women's birth plan, which are including all the preferences or any objections to the particular instrument, it should be taken into account and discussed prior. Whenever there is a mid-pelvic or a rotational birth which is indicated, the risk, the benefit, of the assisted birth should be compared with what are you going to compare? With the risk and benefit of the second stage cesarean section and all the given circumstances and the skills of the operator also. So everything has to take place. Whenever you're doing the mid-pelvic or the rotational birth, you're going to discuss the pros and cons of doing an instrumental delivery versus doing a second stage cesarean section. And the skills of the operator who is going to perform that. The woman's choice is most important, so that also has to be taken into account. Written consent should be obtained for a trial of assisted vaginal birth in an operating theatre. So whenever you're shifting a patient to the theatre, always make sure you're taking a written consent. Now, whenever there is a complex decision making, here whether they're going to choose between a trial of the mid cavity or a second stage cesarean of a deeply engaged head, everything has to be discussed properly and thoroughly documented. The incidence of the pelvic floor morbidity, that is the pelvic floor tears, which can happen, these are found to be threefold higher at 6 weeks, but this attenuated at 1 to 3 years. So if they had some morbidity, if they had some tears, which was higher by at least like 6 weeks, and later on it attenuated, means it decreased by the end of 1 and 3 years. It has been found that. Now, women who have given the birth by the assisted vaginal birth were far more likely to have a vaginal birth in the subsequent pregnancies. And there were no differences in the neurodevelopmental outcome at 5 years. When they compared that, the babies did not have any neurodevelopmental outcome problems. Now, the table, it shows that there are certain serious and frequent occurring risks. And what are these? So it is recommended that all the clinicians, they make every effort to separate all these serious risks, everything frequently affecting risk and all, and see what are the high chances of failure and other things. So when can this instrumentation fail? This can fail when there is a high maternal body mass index, whenever there is an ultrasound estimated weight of 4 kgs or more, the occipito-posterior position, mid-cavity delivery, or when the 1/5 of the head is palpable abdominally. So there are chances that these could fail. Now, what are the serious risks? The third and the fourth degree tear. These tear is 1 to 4 in 100 with the vacuum, and 8 to 12 in 100 with the forceps. So here you know that yes, 1, 4, 8, 12. These are nothing but you're going on adding 4 and 4 and 4. So it is 1 to 4 in 100 with the vacuum. It is 8 to 12 in 100 with the forceps. Okay. Extensive or the significant tears is 1 in 10 with the vacuum and 1 in 5 with the forceps. So we see that with the forceps, they are more frequent. Now the fetal complications again, it is a subgaleal hematoma, or intracranial hematoma, or the facial nerve palsy, which is very rare. So the subgaleal is 3 to 6, intracranial is 5 to 15. But this is in thousands, this is in 10,000. These both are uncommon. Now, what about the maternal frequent risk? The postpartum hemorrhage. This is again 1 in 4, in 10. This is going to be very common because the postpartum hemorrhage could be the atonic, the traumatic, more commonly. So anything which is there, so it can happen with the atonic, it can happen with the traumatic, so it is going to be very common. So that's why the postpartum hemorrhage is 1 to 4 in 10. Now the vaginal tear, the abrasions, again, they are very common. The inexpected dysfunction or the voiding dysfunction can happen. Now what about the baby? Baby can have marks on the face, so this is going to be very common. The chignon or the cup marking could be there. This is also going to be very common. Now, when there is a Keffel hematoma, so this is 1 in 12 out of 100, the lacerations, 1 in 10. So these are the common ones. The jaundice could be there, then the retinal hemorrhages could be there, and the hemorrhages could be again 1738 out of 100. So there are few numbers which you should remember, especially when it happens with the postpartum hemorrhage and the Keffel hematomas, the lacerations. Now, any extra procedure which may become necessary. So you have to tell her that there is a point that you may require episiotomy to help us use this instrument for you. There could be a chance of shoulder dystocia, and we may have to do certain maneuvers to correct that. There is a chance that the instrument could fail, and then we may do a cesarean section. And because you may have postpartum bleeding, you may require blood transfusion. Now, if there are tests, it has to be repaired. And manual rotation prior to the forceps or vacuum assisted delivery could be necessary and help in delivering the baby. So these are the extra procedure which may become necessary. Now, what procedure is likely to involve the benefits? So delivery of the baby vaginally by means of the forceps or the vacuum device. So there could be a chance that cesarean section is performed when the baby's head is very low in the birth canal. It could be more traumatic. We all know this. And it may be appropriate to explain the pregnant woman that no treatment options, everything. She may decline an operative vaginal delivery, even if this could be detrimental to her own health also, or for the baby. So anything could happen. Now, who should perform the assisted vaginal birth? Yes, definitely the one who is trained in that, correct? So, assisted vaginal birth should be performed by or in the presence of an operator who has the knowledge, the skills, and the experience, which is necessary to assess the woman, complete the procedure, and manage the complication that is going to arise. So this operator, he has knowledge, skills, and experience in that, and he can assess the woman, he can complete the procedure, and if the complication arises, he's going to manage that. So this person, he should perform this or he should be present there. This is really important. Now, advise the obstetric trainees to achieve the expertise in spontaneous vaginal birth prior to commencing this training. So they should be perfect in doing the spontaneous vaginal birth first, and then they are stepping in ahead for the assisted vaginal birth. Now, ensure that these trainees, they receive appropriate training in the vacuum and the forceps birth, including the knowledge, which they have theoretical knowledge. Then they are going to have a simulation training, and then they're going to do the clinical training under direct supervision first. So these are the kind of the training assessments which happen. It is a stepwise training assessment. The competency should be demonstrated before doing any of the unsupervised birth. You have to get your OSAT signed before doing a unsupervised birth. Now, the complex assisted vaginal births, it should be performed only by the experienced operator or under the direct supervision. So these points are really important, especially for the part 2 and the part 3, that who is going to perform this kind of a delivery. Now, assessment of clinical competency is the key to all the training that they undergo. So these are called as the objective structured assessment. So there are formative OSATs and there are summative OSATs. So you have to get your OSAT signed and get your the trainees skills assessed before you're going to perform this. An experienced operator, the competent at the mid pelvic birth, he should be present from the outset to supervise all attempts at the rotation of the mid pelvic ones. Now, the trial of the assisted birth in the theater, for this trial, an experienced operator should attend in person or should be immediately available. If the trainee is on duty, has not been assessed or signed off, he should be immediately there in the theater. The non-rotational, low pelvic, and the lift out assisted births, these have the low probability of failures because the baby's head is almost down. And most procedures can be conducted safely in a birth room. So you will get the EMQs where they will tell whether the delivery is going to be conducted in a birth room or the delivery is going to be conducted in a operation theater. In that situation, you should know that any of the non-rotational, any of the low pelvic, any of the lift out to assisted births, these have the low probability of failures and therefore they can be conducted safely in a birth room. Whereas the higher ones, which have the high chance of failure, the rotational ones, The mid-cavity ones, they have a high chance of failure, so that has to be done in the operation theater. So assisted births that have a higher risk of failure should be considered a trial and be attempted in a place where immediate recourse to a cesarean is undertaken. So there the immediate facility is available. You're already in the operation theater. Okay, so this is very important EMQ point. The mid cavity, the rotational, they have high chance of failure. So please do them in the operation theater. If anything goes wrong, you're going to do the cesarean section. The non-rotational, low pelvic, the lift out procedures, they can be easily performed in the birth room because they have the low probability of failure. This is a very important EMQ point. Now, as we discussed prior, the BMI greater than 30, the short stature, weight more than 4 kgs, or a clinically big baby, the head circumference is above the 95th percentile, the occipito-posterior position, the mid-pelvic, or when it is still palpable per abdomen, all these have the high rates of failure. Now, operators should choose the instrument which is most appropriate to the clinical circumstances and to their level of skill. He should choose that instrument. If any of the EMQ has given, and they have given multiple instruments, multiple things, the vacuum, the forceps, or the different kinds of forceps, everything, and there is an option that operator should choose the instrument most appropriate to the clinical circumstance and their level of skill, please go by this. Because this is very important. This is most appropriate answer. Whichever he is skilled in or she is skilled in, they're going to choose that. Operators should be aware that the forceps. Yes,
ma'am, if this option is not there, then what shall we choose, like vacuum or forceps, ma'am?
Always, wherever possible, wherever it is applicable, choose vacuum. That is the first one preferred. The second one, the forceps, the type, rotational, non-rotational, whether it is mid-cavity, low or outlet, I will tell regarding that, which instrument to choose. So that will be the next point. The first preference is the instrument that the operator is good at. The second choice is always choose vacuum over forceps, wherever the clinical scenario is allowing to choose a vacuum. The third one, the type and the station, whether it is mid-cavity, low or the outlet. So I will discuss that in the subsequent slides here. So you have to go by your EMQs in this way. Now, operators should be aware that the forceps and the vacuum extraction, they are associated with different benefits and risks. The failure to complete the birth in a single instrument is more likely with the vacuum. But the maternal perineal trauma is more likely with the forceps. So this you should remember. And this seems more logical. Now, operators should be aware that the soft cup vacuum extractors, they have a higher rate of failure, but a lower incidence of the scalp trauma, definitely. Now, rotational births, it should be performed by the experienced operators. Yes, definitely. Because the choice, again, instrument, everything depends upon the clinical circumstance, the expertise of the individual. The options include the key length rotational forceps or the manual rotation followed by the direct traction forceps or the vacuum, or the rotational vacuum extraction. So whenever you're going to rotate the baby's head and pull out, either it is by the key length rotational forceps, that is the first one. The second one, you are going to manually rotate the baby's head and you are going to directly put a traction forceps or a vacuum, or you are going to use the vacuum to rotate the baby's head. So these three options are available. Now, vacuum extraction, which is compared with the forceps one, amongst all these things, it is less likely the maternal or the vaginal perineal trauma is there, whereas the other incidences like it is more likely to fail, it is more likely to be associated with the capillomatomas or the retinal hemorrhages, or it could be more likely that the maternal worries about the babies. So these chances are higher, but only for the maternal perineal and the vaginal trauma, it is less likely. But again, if you see the birth by the cesarean, the low Apgar scores, the need for the therapy, they are no more likely to be associated with them also. Now, what is the risk-based information that you're getting? So there are lots and lots of percentages which are there. but a few important points which I'm going to discuss in this entire the chart which is given. So here they say episiotomy, vacuum 50. Then the forceps, no more or equal to 90. So it is almost the double that you're getting here. The significant trauma can happen 2 times more with the forceps compared to the vacuum. So it is 10 to 20%. So this is the vulvovaginal tear. Now, as we discussed, the obstetric anal sphincter injury, it is 1, 4, 8, and 12. Can't hear you. Am I audible to others? Just write down in the chat box if I am audible and clear. Yes. Pooja, can you just check at your end, dear, because I am audible to others? Yes, thank you. So, obstetric anal sphincter injury, 1, 4, 8, and 12. So, 1 to 4%, 8 to 12%. The postpartum hemorrhage is again 10 to 40%. This bowel incontinence, this becomes very important in your part 3 preparation. So, you'll get to know the significance of that over there. About the perinatal outcomes and all, these are less likely. The percentages could be asked. But again, if you can just include it as the cephalomatomas, it is 1 to 12. So scalp laceration 10. So close to somewhere around 10% you can mark this. Then the jaundice, again, it is 5 to 15. The hemorrhages are more 17 to 38, almost you're doubling over there. So this is very important, the obstetric anal sphincter injuries, the episiotomies, and the tears. So you can just remember these. The bleeding can happen in 10 to 40%. Okay, now the guideline also says that there is a device called as the Odon device. So this is a low-cost instrument which is designed for the ease of use with the minimal training in the low resource settings. So WHO is implementing a 3-phase trial now, and it shows that it's a kind of a device where the sheath goes beyond the baby's neck and chin and gets covered, and then you're inflating it, and then slowly you're pulling it out. So this is available in different websites. So they're placing the soft cup inside first on the baby's head, and the sheath is being pushed inside. And then when the air cuff, it goes and sits on the baby's jawline here. And later on, they are pumping a minimal and self-limited amount of air into this particular bag. And later on, with the ease, with the sheath itself, they are covering the baby's face completely from the jawline area, and then they're pulling out the baby. So this is a low source setting areas where it's being still under trial. Voice is no longer. Pooja, I think there is some problem at your end, dear. Just check with the speakers and other things, because others are able to hear me. Voice is no longer. Yeah, if others are able to hear me, just put down in the chat box. So I'll continue with the session. Yes, Pooja, others are able to hear me, dear. So please check the speakers at your end. Okay, the next question is, when should vacuum-assisted birth be discontinued? And how should a discontinued vacuum procedure be managed? So discontinue this where there is no evidence of progressive descent. Every word is important. There is no evidence of progressive descent with moderate traction during each pull of a correctly applied instrument by an experienced operator. See the sentence, it has so much of weightage. If you have to discontinue, if there is a person who is very much experienced, there is a person who has applied the instrument correctly, and he is giving moderate traction with each pull, but still there is no evidence of any progressive descent. If there is a descent which is happening, then you should not discontinue this vacuum assisted birth, then continue using that. Okay, so discontinue when There is no evidence of progressive descent with moderate traction during each pull of a correctly applied instrument by an experienced operator. All these words are important. That time you have to discontinue. Yes, we did our maximum efforts here and in the best possible manner, but still there is no progressive descent. So please discontinue the vacuum assisted birth. Complete the vacuum assisted birth in majority of the cases with maximum of 3 pulls to bring the fetal head on to the perineum. Now, if there is a minimal descent with the first 2 pulls of a vacuum, the operator should consider whether the application is suboptimal, the fetal position has been incorrectly diagnosed by me now, or there is a cephalopelvic disproportion if there is only minimal descent. Now, the less experienced operator should stop and seek a second opinion. If there is minimal descent, then check all these points, whether it is applied correctly or not, the baby's head is correct or not, then the incorrectly diagnosed or something, or there is a cephalopelvic disproportion. And if the person is less experienced, then please stop the procedure here. Do not cause any trauma to the baby or the mother and seek a second opinion here. The experienced operator should re-evaluate the clinical findings and either change the approach or discontinue the approach. So the operator, he comes into or she comes into the scene, and then they evaluate the clinical findings, and then they're going to change the approach, whether the vacuum is converted into the forceps or like that, or discontinue and go ahead with the second stage cesarean. So that thing should be there. Now, discontinue the vacuum assisted birth if there have been 2 pop-offs of the instrument. The less experienced operator should seek the senior help here after 1 pop-off itself to ensure that the woman has the best chance of successful assisted birth. So any person, a less experienced person, is applying a vacuum and there is 1 pop-off, then please go and seek the help of an experienced person so that at least he will apply it correctly and then there is a successful birth. But if there are 2 pop-offs by the experienced person, then you have to discontinue the vacuum assisted birth. The rapid negative pressure application for the vacuum assisted is recommended as it reduces the duration of the procedure. But there is no difference for the mother and the baby's outcome. It is only decreasing the duration of the procedure, the rapid negative pressure application. But there is no difference for the mother and the baby here. Now, the use of sequential instruments. This is really important. The use of sequential instrument is associated with increased risk of trauma to the infant. However, the operator needs to balance the risk of cesarean following a failed vacuum extraction with the risk of forceps birth following the failed vacuum extraction. So if there is a failed vacuum extraction, the operator is going to think now whether I should apply the forceps. That is called as a sequential instrument, right? You're using the vacuum and then you're doing it with the forceps. So he should think whether I should apply the forceps now or should I go with the cesarean section at the second stage, which is going to balance the risk and the benefits now. And he has to involve the mother in the care plan. Obstetrician should be aware that increased neonatal morbidity following the failed vacuum assisted birth or sequential instrument, they should be there and they should inform the neonatologist when this occurs to ensure that the baby is managed properly. And obstetrician, they should be aware of the increased risk of obstetric anal sphincter injury following the sequential use of instrument. We all know that forceps is more, it is 8 to 12%. So when you're doing it sequentially, then definitely it is going to increase. Increased risk of neonatal trauma associated with the sequential instruments. The intracranial bleeds are there. So it is 1 in 256 for the 2 instruments, 1 in 334 for a failed forceps, following again by the cesarean section. So the sequential instrument should not be attempted by inexperienced operator. And that too without direct supervision, and should be avoided wherever it is possible. Please avoid the sequential use of instruments. Now, when are you going to discontinue the attempted forceps? Where the forceps cannot be applied easily, the handles do not approximate easily, or if there is a lack of progressive descent with moderate traction. So please stop using the forceps if you are not able to apply it easily, or the handles are not getting locked easily, or there is no progressive descent with moderate traction. Discontinue the rotational forceps if the rotation is not easily achieved with a gentle pressure. You're not going to use more pressure, you'll cause trauma to both mother and the baby. So discontinue this one if the rotation is not easily achieved with a gentle pressure. Discontinue the attempted forceps birth if it is not imminent following 3 pulls of correctly applied instrument by an experienced operator. Yes, did you see in the forceps they are telling about 3 pulls? In the vacuum it was 2 pop-offs. 2 pop-offs by the experienced person, 1 pop-off by the inexperienced person. But here, discontinue the attempted forceps is not imminent by following the 3 pulls by a correctly applied instrument by an experienced operator. Every word is important. Forceps is 3 pulls. Remember this. If there is minimal descent with the first one or the 2 pulls of the forceps, then what will you do? The operator should consider whether the application is suboptimal, the baby's position is correct or no, there is CPD or no. Again, similar to your vacuum, the less experienced operator should stop and seek the another opinion. The experienced person is going to either change the approach or discontinue the procedure. Okay. Now they should be aware that the potential neonatal morbidity following a failed attempt at forceps birth, and inform the neonatologist also that to take care of such babies. Now, what happens when there is an increased risk of fetal head impaction? We have pulled it so much with the forceps that the baby's head got impacted. And this should be prepared to disimpact during the doing certain maneuvers. Like, you have to push the head from below, pull the head from above, or you're going to do the Patwardhan techniques and all. So for the second stage cesarean, so you should anticipate that the fetal head requires disimpaction. The failed forceps birth is associated with the excessive pulls, more than 3, and prolonged application of the instrument greater than 12 minutes, which in turn is going to be associated with the serious neonatal traumatic injuries. So anything which is going beyond 12 minutes, this is going to have problem. If there are excessive pulls like more than 3, this is going to have problem. How about the episiotomy, the mediolateral episiotomy? It should be discussed with the woman as a part of preparation for the birth, the assisted births. And in the absence of the robust evidence to support this routine or restricted use of episiotomy, the decision should be tailored to what circumstances and what the time or the preference of the woman. Everything has to be discussed. Should tell her that preventing the obstetric anal sphincter injuries is stronger for the nulliparous and for the birth by the forceps, so you can use the episiotomy here. And when you're performing this episiotomy, the cut should be at a 60-degree angle, which is initiated when the head is descending into the perineum. Okay. Now again, they have told that there's a large observation study which was found. It is shown that the mediolateral episiotomy was protective against the obstetric anal sphincter injury in both the vacuum extraction as well as the forceps. Now, other one said that there were 5.7% frequency of the injuries and 6-fold reduction in the injury with the use of mediolateral episiotomies. This is really important now. The single prophylactic dose of intravenous amoxiclav should be recommended following the assisted vaginal birth, because it is going to significantly reduce the confirmed or the suspected maternal infection compared to the placebo. So this single prophylactic dose of the IV amoxiclav has reduced the maternal infection following the assisted birth. So this is important. You should remember. The other important thing is good standards of hygiene and asepsis techniques has to be followed. Now reassess the women after assisted vaginal birth for what? For the venous thromboembolism and need for this thromboprophylaxis. This is really important, especially when you come to the part 3. Each and every station demands the assessment for the venous thromboembolisms and the treatment for that. Now, in the absence of contraindications, the woman should be offered the regular non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, which are those the diclofenac and the ibuprofen and paracetamol. These can be routinely prescribed. Now, women should be educated about the risk of urinary retention. This is really important so that they are aware of the importance of bladder emptying in the postpartum period. This is really important now, that the timing and the volume of the first void urine, it should be monitored and documented. This is really important after the instrumental birth. The post-void residual should be measured if there is any urinary retention which is suspected. Now, woman who has received regional analgesia for a trial of assisted birth in the theatre, they have an indwelling catheter in situ after the birth to prevent the covert urinary retention, and this should be removed according to the hospital protocols. So whenever the patient is having regional analgesia for the trial of birth in the theatre, you have to put an indwelling catheter. And after that, you can remove this according to your hospital protocols. Now, offer the women physiotherapy directed strategies to reduce the risk of urinary incontinence at 3 months. So all the Kegels exercise you're going to do, and it should be a supervised physiotherapy. Women who had regional analgesia for the trial of this, they have to be offered indwelling catheter for how many hours? It is 6 to 12 hours after the birth. And later on, according to the hospital protocol, you're going to remove that to prevent any asymptomatic bladder overfilling or any fluid imbalance that is happening. So this is a postpartum voiding dysfunction which can happen. Now, one trial, this involved a woman with the assisted birth. It shows that physiotherapist delivering the intervention, design, this is to prevent the urinary incontinence. It most of the time it reduced by 3 months. And almost like it was seen that from 38.4% to 31% it has reduced in the group of women that had the assisted birth, or the baby was a very big one, like a 4 kg and above. So in that, the physiotherapy has helped them. Now this incontinence, it has reduced over a period of 12 months also. Now, whenever you're doing some decision, it should be a shared decision making. You should communicate well, and positively the continuous support is provided during labor and the birth also. This have the potential to reduce the psychological morbidity. This is really important, the perinatal mental health, which will come in your part 3 again. So the psychological morbidity following such traumatic birth could be there. So review such women before the hospital discharge. And management of any other complications and advice regarding the future birth should be discussed. Now, offer advice and support to the women who have had that traumatic birth and they wish to talk to about all these things they have experienced. Please provide them the support groups. The effect on the birth partner should also be considered. Now, do not offer single session, high intensity psychological intervention with an explicit focus on relieving that particular trauma. No, offer like multiple sessions for them. Offer the woman with the persistent traumatic disorder symptoms, if they have this, 1 month referral to the skilled professionals. So within a month, they have to go and meet these people. This is really important. The biggest predictor of the emotional distress, which is happening postnatally, it was an antenatal emotional distress. Inform the women that there is a high probability of spontaneous vaginal birth following the subsequent assisted births. Individualize all the care plan if the patient has any third or the fourth degree tear. 90% of the women who had the Ventose with their first baby, they had spontaneous or an unassisted second baby. The likelihood of having a spontaneous birth in the subsequent pregnancy is approximately 80% who had required some complex birthing process, especially in the theatre. Clinical governance issues, these are really important. So these are related to the part 3 also, and sometimes the part 2. So documentation, it is really important. So documentation for the assisted birth, what all things it is going to include? Detailed information that how assessment was done, what was the decision taken, how did they do the procedure, what about the postnatal, the care plan, and counseling of the mother, everything has to be mentioned. There is a standard pro forma over there. The paired cord blood gases should be processed and recorded in all attempts of the assisted births. Any adverse outcomes, anything which is failed or the major obstetric hemorrhage, everything, all these things have to be documented. And if there is any problem, then the risk management team will be looking into this matter because it is going to trigger an incident reporting. Any failed instrumentation, any hemorrhage that is happening more than 1500 ml, any third and fourth degree tears, the shoulder dystocias, admission of the newborn, a healthy term baby to the ICU, all these are going to trigger your incident report. Now, how should serious adverse events be dealt with? The obstetrician should ensure that the ongoing care of the woman, the baby, family, everything is very important. And they perform the duty of candor that, yes, they have to apologize and say that we are going to be open and honest with you about all the things that has happened. And then you perform that duty of candor. It is your professional responsibility to be honest with the patients if anything goes wrong. So this is really important. Then obstetrician should contribute to adverse reporting or any inquiries that could happen. There could be some reviews or the audits. So they have to take care about these. Now, maternity units, they should provide the safe and supportive framework to support the woman, the family, the staff people, whenever such events occur. Not only the woman, the family, but our staff people also. There's a table given in the strategy about what the post-delivery care you should do for the babies and all. So if the baby is delivered in good condition, then he or she should be handed over to the mother as soon as possible to encourage the skin-to-skin contact. Double clamp the cord and take the paired cord blood gases. Deliver the placenta by control cord traction, and later on check for the perineal damage. See if there are any tears and repair the tears. Once the repair is completed, do a vaginal and a rectal examination to confirm everything is fine. Check the swabs, sharps, instrument counts, and they're correct. This is really important. Examine the baby's head to confirm that the position of the instrument used was correct or no. This is for your self-audit, whether you have applied it correctly or not. Document each and everything clearly. There is a pro forma given for that. Prescribe the analgesia or the thromboprophylaxis if it is required, and advise on the bladder care. Debrief the woman and the team what all events have happened, and individualize her care plan if she has any third and the fourth degree tears. So this is how you're going to care for a mother who had an assisted vaginal birth. Now, what are the key points? Again, to tell that the proportion of the assisted births was between 10 to 15%. The third and the fourth degrees, it is 1, 4, 8, and 12. So 1, 4 is for the vacuum, 8 to 12% is the forceps. This is a kind of pro forma which is given, which the candidates have to fill. This is an enlarged version, so there are lots of things to be ticked for. Exactly on examination, how was the findings, the prerequisites, how was it, the procedure, the multiple instruments used or no. So this is a big pro forma which is there in your Green Top guidelines. Now it is the safety criteria which makes us to decide. This is very important for the EMQs. So everybody should listen carefully. You are going to see which is the optimal place of birth, whether it is a labor room or if it is a theater. When are you going to take it in the labor room? If the head is low, pelvic or the outlet, so that easily you can take it out. When there is no rotation or it is going to rotate easily, there are no features of CPD. Yes, all these are very logical points that you can do things in your labor room, right? But when head is still palpable abdominally, the 1/5, or the head is in the mid pelvis, the rotation is required, and there are certain suspects that the CPD. So all these things can lead to the failure of your instrumental delivery, and you may require a cesarean immediately. So you are going to do all this trial in your operation theater. Next, how you're going to choose the instrument. First point is, again, the operator. Always remember this. So select an instrument most competent at using, the operator or the supervising operator who is most competent at. That is the first point you're going to select in your EMQ. The next is select an instrument which is least likely to fail. You have to avoid sequential use. Avoid the vacuum if it is less than 32. and with caution if it is 32 to 36. See, these words are very important. Avoid less than 32. Caution 32 to 36. So in this way, you're going to choose your instrument. How we are going to see whether it is correctly applied or not? So if unable to achieve the correct application, again do the reassessment. See for the engagement, see for the position, station, or syncretism, everything is correct or no. And if there is some second opinion is required, please call them. Experienced operators should come and do the evaluation, change the instrument if required, or discontinue the procedure. Discontinue if it is not achieved correct application. Everything after doing this also, if you're not able to do that, then please discontinue and take away the patient for cesarean section. Now, whenever there is an attempt of rotation, if it is there, and if unable to achieve the rotation easily, a senior obstetrician is going to check for this and discontinue the procedure. Now, what about the attempts of traction? If there is no progressive descent, so check if this is correctly applied or not, reassess and rule out CPD, seek a second opinion if you are less experienced, and experienced operator may revise his approach either by changing or altering the direction of traction. Discontinue the procedure if descent is not achieved with any of these measures. Discontinue the vacuum assisted. I told you people, it is 2 pop-offs of the instrument. Now, what happens about the pulse? So, consider discontinuing the procedure if in the vacuum assisted birth, the head is not on the pelvic floor. The birth is anticipated with maximum of 3 gentle pulls. So, after 3 pulls, if it is not there, you discontinue the procedure. If you are using the forceps birth, the head is not crowning with the birth imminent, then you're going to discontinue the procedure. Now, failed at attempt of a operative vaginal birth. So consider the consequences of failed attempt. What are you going to see? Consider forceps followed by failed vacuum only with the vertex at low station. If you have used the vacuum and the head has come down to low station, only then you're going to consider the forceps over the failed vacuum. If not, take away the patient for cesarean section. Increased risk of trauma to the fetus or the obstetric anal sphincter injuries are there with the sequential instrumental use. So this could be the consequence. Increased morbidity for the mother or a cesarean section, the birth in the second stage, this is also there. And the baby's head impaction in the cesarean birth. Now, what are you going to do after the reassess, after the 3 pulls? So, if in the vacuum assisted birth, the head is not on the pelvic floor with maximum 3 gentle, and if the forceps and birth, everything is not becoming imminent, so there also you're doing this, right? Then you have checked for the failed the procedure. And after this, all the morbidity and mortality, like the morbidity of the mother and the baby, what are you going to do? Inform the neonatologist of the increased risk and complete the operative vaginal birth pro forma. Debrief the mother, the partner, or the family members. And then you're going to complete this part. Okay. I have few practice questions over here. So I would like you people to write down the answers in the chat box for this. Okay. So she is a primary gravida with a 37 weeks spontaneous labor. She has progressed well. It is 10 minutes prior because of suspicious CTG. They did a fetal blood sampling. It was done. It was said to be normal. Now she is having prolonged bradycardia for more than 3 minutes now. Abdominal examination, the fetal head is not palpable. Vaginal examination, it revealed the vertex is at +2 and the baby has occipito anterior position. So which is the most appropriate management? When the head has come to +2, abdomen it is not palpable, means it has gone down below to 0 station, right? Now we did a vaginal examination, we found it as a +2. So 0 and 1 is your mid cavity. Your +2 and +3 is your, yes. So this is going to be your, very good, proud of you all. So this is going to be your low cavity forceps, okay? Because your +2 is there and this is going to be, your +2 means it is a low cavity. Whereas your mid cavity will be 0 and +1 Your low cavity will be +1 and +2 and +3, and your outlet is going to be +4 and +5. Very good. So here you can see mid cavity, it is 0, it is not palpable from the abdomen, and the +1, these are going for the mid cavity. If rotation, just 2 minutes, dears. Okay, sorry for the interruption. So the mid cavity, we know that it is 0 or +1. So 0, it is not palpable from the abdomen. Now we have to see whether this case requires rotation or not. No rotation is required. So if the rotation is required and you have to rotate the baby's head for more than 45 degrees, you have to choose an instrument by which you can rotate. So that is your Kielen's forceps, right? So if there is a mid cavity and if there is rotation which is required, please choose the Kielen's forceps. And we all know that mid cavity instrumentation happens in the theater. Okay, so all these points have to come. You are going to do this in a theater and you are going to see whether rotation is required or not. If rotation is required, I am going to choose the Kielen's forceps. If there is no rotation required, choose the Neville Barnes or the Simpson's forceps for a mid cavity instrumentation in the theater. Now, what about the low cavity? Low cavities are your +2 and +3s. So this is either the Simpsons again, you can use the same one, and the Wrigley's. The outlet is +4 or +5. +5 is head is visible even without separating the labia. So it is Wrigley's. So you know these two are overlapping here. The low cavity and the outlet, the Wrigley's can be used. The Simpsons are overlapping here, the mid cavity and the low cavity. Whereas Kielen's is for your purely mid cavity. Okay, so am I clear with this table that how you're going to choose your instrument of choice and the place where you're going to apply? A mid cavity operation theater, 0 and +1. Rotation required more than 45 degrees, please choose Kielen's. No rotation required, it is Neville Barnes or Simpson's. Then you're going for the next one, the low cavity, plus 2 or plus 3. It is Simpson's or the replace. The last one where it is just visible, it is kind of a lift out, it is your replace forceps. Yes, thank you. So next question is that you are about to see a primary cavity with epidural and the low risk patient. It's been 3 hours that she is fully dilated. 1 hour of active pushing. She is getting exhausted. The midwife has asked to review her. On examination, the vertex is at +1. The heart rate is normal. What is your further advice on this? Whether you want to do some mid cavity, low cavity outlet, encourage pushing, do a cat 2 cesarean, what you're going to do for this patient. So already 3 hours have crossed. It is at +1. What you're going to do? Very good. So you people have, it's been clear for all of you now that we have waited for 3 hours of a total 3 hours duration for a priming. Yes, she has completed her 3 hours fully now. Now you have to deliver her, but you see that everything is normal and it is coming as a +1. So it is your mid cavity. If any option is given that it is mid cavity in theater, mid cavity in room, then please go for the mid cavity in theater. So it's very much clear for all of you. Yeah, so proud of you all. A
Excuse me,
single
ma'am.
dose on which, yes, dear.
Ma'am, in the previous question, if vacuum is there in the option, then we have to choose vacuum.
You mean to say this question?
Second question, ma'am.
The second one.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, the mid cavity, if anything higher up is there, if you're requiring it, the delivery could be there by the forceps, please go by that. Vacuum is always preferred wherever given the choice. But if they could be they'll give you something like, some contraindications or something, whether it could be some preterm or less than 32 or some indication they will give you. So, which will make the path very much clear, whether you have to choose a vacuum or a forceps. If given an option, wherever there is a vacuum, go by that instrumentation. But if there is some contraindication which is given in the question, so read each and every word clearly. If there is some contraindication which is given, then go by the mid cavity forceps, and that too in the theater.
Ma'am, like in this question, if no the question is the same. If
No
just vacuum is
contraindications. Yes.
no
First preferred
contraindication
is the
and
vacuum. No
okay, so
rotations or something like that. So
in mid cavity also first we'll go for vacuum.
always prefer the vacuum ones, and then go
Okay.
for the forceps.
And ma'am, one more doubt I have. Like in rotational instrument, we apply only in the mid cavity. In low and outlet, if at all it's still not rotated, will it not be rotational?
See, it depends. There are the manual rotation, and then you're doing the sequence extraction, or you're rotating with the vacuum and doing the extraction, where it is like, requiring more than 45, less than 45, these are there. But it is a mid cavity, it requires more than 45. Always go for the key lands. So that is easy to rotate in the mid cavity.
Okay,
So
ma'am.
then you
Actually,
have to choose the key lands.
my doubt is like if the patient is at +2 and it is occipito posterior. So will we deliver her occipito posterior or will we rotate her and then deliver?
That all depends, dear, like the situation scenario that they create.
Okay. Okay, ma'am.
So whether complete, see, the situations are more than 45, less than 45 degrees rotation. It is not like a total 180-degree rotation over there. So they'll
Okay.
give you a clear-cut scenario in your exam. Okay.
Okay, okay, ma'am. Okay, thank you.
Okay, dear. So the third question is, a single prophylactic dose of which antibiotic has to be recommended? Yes, so it is your intravenous amoxicillin and the clavulanic acid. The percentage of women who give birth by the assisted vaginal birth in UK are, yes, so it is 10 to 15%. Very good. Which of the following statements regarding the forceps and the ventouse is correct? Which one of them is correct? Forceps is not the preferred instrument in preterm deliveries. Ventouse is relatively contraindicated between 34 to 36. Ventouse is not contraindicated in preterms. The ventouse can be used safely less than 34. So it is your answer B, that it is relatively contraindicated between your 34 to 36. Very good. Which of the following is more common in ventouse deliveries than the forceps deliveries? A decreased need for second instrumentation to complete, an increased risk of cesarean, an association with the cephalomatomas and the retinal hemorrhages, the significant maternal perineal vaginal trauma. Very good. So it is your association of the cephalomatomas and the retinal hemorrhages. A gravida 2 para 1, so she has a gestational diabetes and she's on insulin. Now she was induced at 38 weeks of gestation. The baby is large for dates. Second stage has lasted for 2.5 hours. She has been pushing since she was fully dilated, and CTG is now showing deep decelerations. 2/5 is still palpable. The vaginal findings, everything, it shows that the vertex is still at +1. Left occipital transverse, slightly defects, the caput is present. So in this scenario, like, which one would you like to do? Yes, so this goes for a cesarean section. So trial, or it could be the category cesarean sections. So you are going proceed directly for the cesarean here. It is not the trial you're giving. So you're going to go for directly for a cesarean, because this feature looks like the patient has cephalopelvic disproportion. So the answer C is correct. Now the primary gravida, she has been in the second stage of labor for 3 hours. Primary, 3 hours are done. She has been pushing for 2 hours. So this does not matter. The total 3 hours is done. The head is still 1/5 palpable. Vertex is at +1. It is right occipito-posterior. Caput is there. The molding is there. CTG is reassuring. She has done with 3 hours. Vertex is at +1. Yes, so you are going to do the trial in theater, that is your mid cavity, correct? So if it fails, then you're going to do the cesarean section here. Now a gravida 2 para 1 mid cavity rotational, yes dear. Gravida 2 para 1 previous normal vaginal delivery, she has gestational diabetes. This we saw. So proceed directly to the cesarean section. So these were the few questions which I had to discuss with you all, and few were taken from the strategy also. And about the next course, what Geetika and me are planning is we want to do something very like the CRISP revision. So it's a kind of marathon course we both are planning for, where the important GTGs, the NICE guidelines, the talk articles, and important BASH and other important topics are going to be chosen. We are going to do this for 10 days, starting from the 20th of June, and every night at 9:30 IST. This will run for some 3 to 4 hours. So this session is going to give you a crisp revision of whatever you have studied. So we are planning to launch this RAISE MRCOG Part 2 marathon course for the July exam going batch. So we have thought about having some limited seats, because we are able to concentrate more on the candidates over here, and a decent revision for 3 to 4 hours, and with the mentors, it's going to really help you all for this crisp revision for the 10 days. So any of you who are interested in this, so kindly directly message us. So we'll be contacting you regarding this. And tomorrow, Dr. Geetika is going to take a session on the Green Dot guideline, gestational trophoblastic disease. So same timings, 9:30 p.m. IST. And we are also planning for a September course. So if any of you are there for the September course, we'll be discussing things in detail about that also. So all the best for you all, and thank you for joining in with me for this session, and hope it was all useful. And the concepts regarding the instrumental deliveries, the forceps, the vacuum, when to abandon, and which instrument to choose. So this has been clear for you all. So thank you so much and have a nice time. Study well. It was lovely being with you all. Thank you. Thank you, dears. Bye. Take care. Good night. Thank you.